Canadian Defence Minister Bill Blair is still in Brussels this morning for a key NATO meeting. U.S. President Trump's demands in terms of defence spending will be a key part of those talks. But it's his surprise announcement about ceasefire talks in Russia's war on Ukraine that's now the top issue. And Trump isn't saying directly that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy will have a role in peace negotiations.
You view Ukraine as an equal member of this peace process?
It's an interesting question. I think they have to make peace. Their people are being killed, and I think they have to make peace. I said that was not a good war to go into, and I think they have to make peace. That's what I think.
Donald Trump is planning to hold a one-on-one summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. And that's a huge change in U.S. policy. Putin's been frozen out by Washington and other NATO powers since he sent his Russian forces into Ukraine on February 22nd of 2022. So we're very nearly approaching that 3-year mark. The White House says Trump had a 90-minute phone call with Putin yesterday. And Trump says he's planning to meet Putin in Saudi Arabia in what he says will be the not-too-distant future. Let's bring in Crystal Gomansing from London with more on the story. In a social media post, Crystal, U.S. President Trump says peace talks for Ukraine involving American and Russian negotiators are starting immediately. So how is that surprise announcement landing this morning at that NATO meeting in Brussels?
Well, Heather, all of those defense ministers who are gathering in Brussels, including Canada's Minister Bill Blair, are really coming out with what appears to be a unified message saying Ukraine has to be at that table, that there is no discussion about Ukrainian territory without Ukraine. We are hearing from Bill Blair saying there has to be a talk on ensuring just and sustainable peace. That being reiterated by the UK's defense minister, the Lithuanian minister, the Swedish minister. And of course, this is all in light of what the U.S. Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, had to say yesterday in Brussels. Today, when he arrived for that NATO defense ministers meeting, he really stood by his comments. And I want to play that for you quickly, and then we can kind of remind everybody of exactly what he said.
My role as a representative of the United States is to speak realistically about the course of that conflict. And I think you saw from President Trump yesterday, who himself is the best negotiator on the planet, bringing two sides together to find a negotiated peace.
So again, his comments very clear, very stated, very bold, and it follows exactly what he had said yesterday, saying they were surprising messages to many, including Ukrainians, that Ukraine must recognize that pre-2014 borders are a, quote, unrealistic objective, and that, quote, the United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome of negotiated settlements. So those are sort of some of the issues that the defense ministers, including Canada, are going into this discussion today. And it appears that this is not an agreed upon position, and people are surprised. Take a listen to what Sweden's defense minister had to say regarding the American position.
The U.S. position from this administration is that this is about claiming that NATO membership should not be part of this political agreement. I don't foresee the NATO membership as such being off the table for Ukraine. Our position is well known and communicated, and we stand behind what was said at the Washington summit, of course, that Ukraine's future is in NATO.
So Ukraine's future is in NATO. That is uncertain. It's worth noting, Heather, that NATO membership was never assured for Ukraine. It was often talked about, including by the defense secretary under President Joe Biden. Lloyd Austin often said that he had no doubt that Ukraine would join. So this all will be heavily debated today in Brussels.
So, Crystal, also Donald Trump pushing his demand that Canada and the other NATO countries put defense onto the agenda. Again, his push for even more spending, of a greater percentage of GDP on defense spending. Any reaction to that proposal at the meeting this morning?
Absolutely. And you critically pointed out that the 5% that's being talked about and pushed by the United States is not the benchmark that is currently met by the United States. It is certainly not the benchmark met by Canada. Canada not yet meeting that 2% GDP spending requirement. So the idea of bumping it up to 5% is a big ask. However, it is also widely accepted by NATO nations that they do need to spend more on defense given the current environment. Take a listen to what Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, had to say.
We have to spend more, not only because the US expects that, because they expect Europe to take its and pay its fair share, but also we have to spend more because we know the threat coming from Russia and from other adversaries is increasing. And that will be debated today.
So a push and an understanding, Heather, that NATO nations will have to do more to ensure their own security, not relying on the United States.
Crystal, thank you very much.